Good Sunday morning to you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on when you will be watching this live broadcast. It is truly a joy to be connected with you today on this beautiful morning where we will be doing a reflection around a topic that is much necessary on current days, every day in reality. Before we begin with the workshop, the public lecture, the conference that is going to be given by Marcelo Netto today with the topic Forgiveness as the Way and the Way to Forgiveness. And as you are arriving, we are going to be doing an opening reading from a message from the book Living Spring. It is message number 38, If Only We Knew. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing, is the message contained. It is contained in Luke 23:34. And this is how Emmanuel explains this passage. If murderers knew beforehand how much pain life is going to charge them in order to readjust their destiny, they would prefer not to even have arms at all in order to withhold the deadly blow. If defamers could eliminate the crust of darkness that maddens their vision and foresee the suffering that awaits them as they settle accounts with the truth, they would paralyze their vocal cords or lay down their pen rather than wrongly accuse someone. If deserters of the good could see the dangerous traps that the darkness sets to steal their joy of living, they would gladly wear the sanctifying shackles of the heaviest responsibilities. If ingrates could see the bile of bitterness that will invade their heart later on, they would never perpetrate the crime of indifference. If selfish persons could perceive the infernal loneliness that is awaiting for them, they would never depart from the tireless practice of fraternity and cooperation. If gluttons could see the damage they are causing their body, thus hastening their death, they would render unwavering worship to frugality and harmony. If we knew how terrible the result of disrespecting the divine laws will be, we would never depart from the upright road. So forgive those who hurt you or slander you. Those who give in to the disturbing suggestions of evil do not know what they are doing. The message is very beautiful, but I'm going to hold off on the comments because the entire presentation that is going to be given by Marcelo Netto this morning is going to offer ample reflections for us today. So let us start with the opening prayer as we begin the work for this morning in saying, Dear Father, dear Jesus, and benevolent spirits, we are so very grateful for this morning. There are so many blessings that often we forget to thank you for, such as the great ability to see, to hear, to speak, to walk. It's the simple fact that this morning we opened our eyes and were able to get out of bed. Yet, if we find ourselves in a distressing situation where depression may be setting in, or we may feel hopeless or helpless, please help us and encourage us with the voices of the missionaries that work on your behalf to speak directly to our souls, reminding us that life is beautiful, that we were given this reincarnation in order to succeed, to progress, to evolve, that we are blessed because we are the creatures of our Father. We are divine beings, for our essence comes directly from the Creator. We are so very grateful, for we have the spiritist body of knowledge that come to guide and instruct us and help us in every step that we take along the way of this physical journey. Help us so that we are always instrument for those that follow us closely in the spirit realm, observing our every move. Let us be reminded of the responsibility that we have for one another and give us your blessing today and always. So be it. So good morning to you again. Good morning, Adnilson. Good morning, everyone who is accompanying us. We are going to be presenting now our speaker of this morning. You all know him, Marcelo Netto, and he's going to be bringing us the topic today with forgiveness as the way and the way to forgiveness. Marcelo, welcome.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Thank you very much, each and everyone who will join us in this morning so we can reflect for a few aspects of this miracle word called forgiveness. Forgiveness as the way and the way to forgiveness. The first slide that we have, and we can see here, what does forgiveness means to you? When we see in the portion of the daily Our Lord's Prayer, when one of the portions of this prayer says like, and forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors, what exactly that means for you? Forgiveness is a virtue that requires continuous effort from our part to be implemented. It's something that we have to make it capable for us to go beyond ourselves, to enlighten ourselves. Alberto Almeida would say this is for us to be revealing a transhumanization. That's the word that he uses in his book. It has the same title of our lecture today, revealing the transhumanization about our nature as ever ascending spiritual being. Forgiveness is a voyage, much rather than an arrival port, as he mentioned in his book. It is also an act that we can perform, but most of all, it is a life habit. It's a process, not just a circumstantial state of being. I brought this another slide here just for us to know the root of forgiveness. And let's read together this the origin of this word. The root of forgiveness it comes from the Latin word perdonare. It means to give completely, without any reservation. That perdonare is also the source of our English word pardon. We are reading the slide. So when the Latin perdonare was adopted into the Germanic ancestor of English, it was translated piece by piece, making the result that linguistics call a coquille, from a French coquille, to trace or copy. This is a literal transliteration. So per was replaced by for, a prefix that in this case means truly, and donare with giffen from the German word to give. So per, total, complete, truly, and donare, to give, hand over, to donate, perdonare. It's really interesting how words are being constructed, are being built, but meaning exactly, this is not, when we forgive, it's not, as we mentioned in the beginning, something that it's like an arrival port. It's a process, it's a voyage through an action to give a little more from ourselves. This is really interesting, that invite us to extend the ability that we have to love a little bit more. So forgiveness, it's not for the angels or for the archangels. They have already enlightened themselves through love. Forgiveness is a path of growth for us who need to learn how to love a little bit more. So forgiveness, it's not connivance with the wrongdoing of someone else. No. Rather, it means taking responsibility for the wrong and the righting it. It's interesting. So to forgive means to take a pathway of love for as long as needed to resolve an instance, for example, rancor, remorse, or whatever the case may be. And love is the substrate, the raw material for us to perform the forgiveness, to forgive someone. And of course, this might take, for example, a certain amount of time for us to forgive. It could take, for certain people, like a minute. We know this. It can take a day, a couple of hours. For others, a week, a month, sometimes a year, sometimes a decade. For others, a whole lifetime. And for others, too many lifetimes to perform the act of forgiveness. So this will depend, I would say, actually Alberto Almeida would say, depending on three variables: the severity of the offense, the willingness to forgive, and the ability to love. These three variables, of course, are going to change according to the level of advancement of evolution that the individual already reached. There's one passage in the book of Matthew on chapter 5, and I will ask to change the slide, that shows this is something really that strikes us, because when Matthew mentioned this word that Jesus mentioned, actually, reconcile, he's putting reconciles, not consiling, stating that sometimes it could be like something that we are in a recurrent mode. So reconcile yourself with your adversary quickly while you are on the road with him, so that he will not hand you over to the judge and the judge hand you over to the officer, who will throw you into prison. Verily I say to you that you will not be released until you have paid the last cent. This is in Matthew. It's interesting because he used the word reconcile, something that we've been recurring in this process. So let's reconcile one more time, because we failed in previous moments. It could be a previous existence, a previous moment of our time. But interesting, how could we pay something if we are in prison? When we pay something, it means another opportunity that reincarnation give us when we are imprisoned in another body, in another lifetime, with the same adversaries from the past, trying to make amends and try to extend this possibility to love a little more. That's why reconcile yourself with your enemies, your adversary, depending on which translation we see, while we are on the road with him, trying to use the word perdonare, to forgive, give something extra that it already exists inside of you. Do this effort. Go a little beyond. If we go on the next slide, in the Matthew chapter 18, verse 21 through 35. Peter, when this dialogue take place, when then Peter came to him, to the Lord, saying, then Peter to him and said, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? Until 7 times? This was Peter's question. And Jesus said to him, I say not unto thee, until 7 times, but until 70 times 7. Meaning that not the number 7 has a very Kabbalistic way of understanding. It means like constantly forgive as much as possible, infinitely, so you can develop inside of your soul this capacity to extend the possibility to love a little more. And it's possible. Knowing that the human beings are weak, Jesus take advantage of this certain incidents, certain circumstances, to propose this 70 times 7, indicating, as we saw in the previous slide, the recurrent nature of fallibility that characterize humanity. It's still at a level of very, very precarious evolution. The next slide that we will see in this book, Forgiveness as the Way to Forgiveness, written by Alberto Almeida, we will see who is our adversary. Who is this adversary? It could be sometimes our spouse, could be a mother, could be a father, son, a daughter, the entire family, a business partner, our own body, a profession, a religion's belief, a country. And we see this. Sometimes we have this kind of aversion for someone else, for some kind of religion, for a country, whatever the case may be, meaning that we had something in the past that strike us in this current moment of our present life, asking from ourselves to re-examine exactly what is taking place inside of our spirit. The next slide shows what should we do if the other rejects the reconciliation. What exactly should we do? Respect the other person's will if he or she decides to avoid a reunion for whatever reason. Since it's not our place to violate anyone's will, we must remain silent, for we have done our part and we all can be at peace. This is something that constantly are being asked in the fraternal assistance. When people talk to us, ask us, I am trying to approach someone else that I hurt profoundly in the past, but they are not accepting my forgiveness. We have to respect their time, because everyone has a time to be open to this kind of offering. And we might have our time sometimes, depending on the severability of the offense, we might take some time to forgive. For some people, forgiveness, it's something really easy to receive. For others, it takes a little time. It depends how, in the next slide we'll say, how proud we are, how selfish we are, when we see in the questions of the Spirit's book what is truly behind remorse or rancor. And this is a question that Allan Kardec posed in this question 785. What is the greatest obstacle to progress? This progress that lies within, that is a responsibility for the human being, for the creatures of God to embrace, is the greatest obstacle is the pride and selfishness. And the good spirits are referring to the moral progress, since intellectual progress is always occurring. This is a question that we must read and go through all these questions to understand exactly this dynamic that take place inside of our hearts. The next slide, it shows someone looking at himself in this mirror. Pride and selfishness are two giants that structures the matrices from which remorse and anger arise, keeping us from moving forward. Pride, egoically speaking, if I can use this word, reflects our own insecurities, reflects our low self-esteem, our feeling of unworthiness, the weakness that we sometimes we possess. So selfishness manifests a lack for which our soul seeks compensation from the outside in by resorting to things and people that the soul feels should revolve around its ego, which sometimes is poor. We feel empty, we feel hungry. Next slide. Are there consequences for those who are unwillingly to forgive? This is something that we should think about. In the next slide, we will say the psycho-spiritual consequences. Let's put the psycho-spiritual consequences, the psychosocial emotional consequences, and the biological consequences. The psycho-spiritual consequences, cultivating remorse can entail a connection with unhappy spirits, leading to obsessions that reinforce guilt or induce self-loathing, self-condemnation, self-punishment, depression, thoughts of suicide. And the psychosocial emotional consequence regarding the emotional rancor and or guilt manifests through egoic difficulty as it affects interpersonal relationships due to the accumulation of emotional garbage it brings to social interaction. And also the biological consequences. Every psychological attitude of lengthy fixation in the cultivation of guilt or hurt leads illness, appearing with infectious features. It could be viruses, bacteria, fungi, and etc. As a degenerative process, autoimmune disorders, and you can name it. So we have a tremendous responsibility with our spirit, with our body, and holding the grudge, keeping this garbage that means not forgiving, keeping this, being a slave of something that happened to us. It's not good, not at all. So the next slide, we will see the toxic guilt and the rancor. Guilt and hurt are the two sides opposed to forgiveness. Guilt is only desirable when it is expressed as a repentance. For example, coming to one sense, taking responsibility for making room for a new movement of the soul towards something, a reparative action, to make a reparation towards this process that we have. In the Spirit's book and question, the next slide, we will see something magical that needs to be exercised by each and every one, because it tells about the true meaning of the word charity as Jesus understood it. And it brings something that before the Spiritist codification, we didn't pay much attention of it. Means benevolence towards everyone, indulgence toward the imperfection of others, and forgiveness for offenses. Because we also need benevolence toward our own imperfections, indulgence towards own imperfections, and we need to be forgiven, because in this way of redemption, pathway of illumination, we might commit a few mistakes, we might hurt someone, we might be subject to the forgiveness of something else. Somebody, not something else, pardon, just from someone else. There's a story that I read a few years ago, and I mentioned that story previously in a lecture that we gave. This is just a few points that we have to think about this action, this act of forgiveness. And it's a story of a community, an Amish community in the state of Pennsylvania. This took place and was thoroughly reported in the Washington Post in October 2016. It was a beautiful Monday morning. It was October 2nd, 2006. The name of the city was Nickel Mines in Pennsylvania. A man backed his pickup truck into a schoolyard of a West Nickel Mines Amish school. And inside that school, it's a very, very small school, one room, were 28 students and 3 adult women, the teacher and 3 visitors that specific date. The intruder, that man, Charles Robert, was a milk truck driver, and he already very well known in that area. But that morning, that specific morning, he was with a complete mindset in his heart. He was heavily armed, and when he got into the school, he ordered everyone to lie on the floor. The teacher and one other adult dashed for the door, escaped for help, and Roberts ordered the remaining adults, the remaining boys, out of the school. Robert nailed the door, shut and pulled the blinds to darken the room, and tied together the legs of the remaining 10 girls who were still lying on the floor at the front of the room. He told them that he was very angry at God. He had been for years. He could not forgive God, and he cannot forgive himself because of the death of his daughter. By this time, police had begun arriving at the school, responding to a phone call that the teacher made after running half a mile to other neighbors' farmhouse. And when realizing the police had arrived and were asking him through a bullhorn to surrender, Robert himself called 911, telling the responder that he would shoot everyone if the police did not leave. Moments later, he opened fire, getting off 13 shots. 13 shots. The rampage killed 5 of the girls and injured very severely other 5. And after firing a shot through a window at the police, he killed himself. Within 30 minutes, this event literally became news around the world. But very quickly, the media story shifted completely. The victimized Amish community, it seemed to many observers, was reacting in a very strange ways. Of course, the reporters, when we read this article in the Washington Post, mentioned that the grief was, of course, very intense, but they did not convert their grief and shock into calls for retribution. The killer was dead, but the Amish did not engage in the most common form of revenge we constantly see in our society: attacking Robert's character or degrading his memory. Other neighbors said they hoped he was enjoying burning in hell, but the Amish said they trusted he had met a merciful God. A merciful God. Interesting. Instead, they sought to treat Roberts as a fellow human being. Trouble, to be sure, but one whose memory warranted respect and whose survivors needed love and compassion. And within a few hours of shooting, members of the local Amish community reached out in sympathy to his widow, to his parents-in-law, assuring them that they would not scapegoat them for what happened. 6 days later, when most non-Amish neighbors stayed away from Robert's burial, the Amish did not and ended up being half of the mourners present, and again hugged his family, and they all cried together. They included Amish parents who had just the day before buried their own daughters. And about the same time, the Amish committee set up to oversee the money that started to pour in from around the world for the shooting victims, announced that they would be diverting some of the money, a portion of that money, to a second fund for the Roberts family. Now this was big news. And it was a story that reporters and the public was, as the reporter says, unprepared for. They did not know what to make of it. Forgiveness of this sort was not very common. Some people praise Amish forgiveness and jump to apply its example to a host of other social and political issues. Others denounced Amish forgiveness, condemning it as too fast, emotionally unhealthy, and a denial of innate human need to seek revenge. Look at the considerations that a few made, reacting about what the Amish reacting was. Why did the Amish forgive? There is a book that we have based on our lecture, recently translated to English and written by Dr. Alberto Almeida, and the title is precisely Forgiveness as the Way and the Way to Forgiveness. And it explains how forgiveness is possible. It brings several cases, several circumstances, several scenarios where we can find ourselves in with the challenge of forgiving others and forgiving ourselves. It is important here to clarify what the Amish believe forgiveness and what the Amish believe that it's not. It means like there's a differentiation. It's not pretending that nothing happened or that the offense wasn't so bad. Not at all. It's not saying there should be no consequences for actions. The Amish, no doubt, would have supported his prosecution and imprisonment for the sake of course, everyone's safety. But instead, forgiveness is about giving up your right to revenge, and giving up feeling of resentment, bitterness, and hatred, replacing them with compassion toward the offender, and treating the offender as a fellow human being. I know this is extremely hard work, even if the decision to forgive is settled. The Amish people told the reporter, the acid of hate destroys the contain that holds it, and it's not good to hold grudges. Why not let go, give it up, and not let the person who wronged you have power over you? So forgiving, it's not about self-denial, and also it's not about not self-loathing. In fact, forgiving, the Amish affirm, the Spiritists affirm, it's good for you, not just for the person forgiven. Although the Amish never anticipated the horror of nickel mines, they were prepared to respond long before they needed to. What does this mean for the rest of us? You have to make your decision. Based on this story, we can understand that we have the capacity to go beyond, to forgive not only small offenses, but huge ones. We are all capable of possibilities that goes way beyond that we understand. And reincarnation brings us another opportunity to revisit certain circumstances that bother us, hurt us tremendously, giving us a new scenario, but with the same feelings, so we can make amends and reconcile with our enemies, understanding that everything is possible in the heart of someone that brings merciful into his life. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. And Andrea, when she mentioned and she read the initial message, let's remember to that man that on the cross say and ask the Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Would you be capable to do something like that? I think we are. even though at this moment we are far away for the acts of forgiveness, as we mentioned in this beautiful story about the Amish, we can start this pathway of redemption, this pathway of freeing ourselves from the feeling that still holds us back into that circumstances, and see that love awakens for you, because in fact love is our essence. I know this is very simple. The talk that we have now is just a little appetizer for us to endure this pathway of redemption. And I encourage you maybe to read this book, as maybe Andrea are going to mention, and to keep going. Exercise yourself, because we are capable to do much more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, excuse me, Marcelo, for this beautiful presentation this morning. So much food for thought, so touching and profound. It gets us thinking about the moments of those who have erred against us, and also about the moments we have erred, right? And made mistakes and were in need of forgiveness. So thank you so much, Marcelo. We wanted to remind you before we do our final prayer that we are hoping to be together very soon, physically, that is, as this pandemic is coming closer to being more in control. And I have placed here on the screen the QR code for donations. If you wish to make a donation to help us, there will be a lot of costs involved in getting the space ready. And every cent, even if it's $10, $20, it doesn't matter. Any amount will be welcome as we start planning for the return physically to a new location. I want to thank you for being with us this morning, and I'm going to invite you to do our final prayer with us at this time. Dear Jesus, Father above, so much food for thought this morning related to the aspect of forgiveness. It is such a hard road sometimes, for we know what is involved when we are unable to forgive, and the pain that it causes, keeping us unable to take steps forward, the heaviness and the burden that comes with being stagnant in the feeling of rancor, of hatred, of hurt. We also know that burden when it has to do with ourselves, the inability to forgive ourselves, and how remorse takes over our entire self, the guilt aspect of it, unable to ask for forgiveness, unable sometimes to even forgive what we have done. Yet we know that at the last moment of your life, physically on the earth, you left us with the invaluable gift of the message of asking the Father for forgiving what was being done, for the ignorance of those around you was far greater than the understanding of what was being done. We know that we are created simple and ignorant, as in unaware of the divine laws. Yet, we also know that we have reached a spiritual maturity where we are able to assimilate your teachings and be brave enough to put into action, be strong enough to overcome ourselves, that which still holds us behind pride and selfishness. But yet, we need your assistance. We need your strength and your peace so that we continue adjusting ourselves to the divine laws, so that we can little by little let go of all that is still holding us back, undoing the knots of previous existences that were brought into this life, a life given so that we are able to readjust ourselves before the divine laws where we have all erred in the past. Remind us always of the need to forgive. As all of the beautiful content brought on by Marcelo this morning, we know that this can only make us happy, that it can only assist us in moving forward. Bless each and every one of us, our homes, our family, and loved ones, and stay with us always. So be it. On this note, thank you again for participating, for being connected with us. We miss you all so, so much. So it's always great to see you connected and hanging on tight as we continue with our activities online. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful, wonderful week.